Yeah.
Ooh, the booch.
Okay, good morning, folks. The sun is shining, so that's good news since I haven't had much of that lately. Welcome. We are going to hear this morning about public transit and access to services. And as we've heard many times in this committee, transportation is oftentimes a barrier to accessing services, whether it's an older Vermonter trying to get to a meal site, a person with substance use disorder trying to access their healthcare provider, a person with developmental disabilities who doesn't have a license and just wants to go downtown, any and all of those things. Can be a barrier for people. So we're grateful to have Clayton Clark here this morning, who is going to tell us about Green Mountain Transit. And I think that or at least I know I'm aware of, some of the changes that you've had to undergo in the last several months, and really sort of like in the post-COVID funding era where everything was free and wasn't really free, but it appeared to be free. Yeah. So we're going to this is your first time in committee this year. So we're going to do a quick run around the room. We have new members this year so that you can know what parts of the state you're talking to. I'm Teresa Wood from Waterbury, and I also serve Bolton, Buell Gore, and Huntington.
Ann Donahue from Northfield, also Berlin.
Good morning, Dan Noyes. I represent Wolcott, Hyde Park, Johnson, and Belvedere.
Hi, good morning. Eric McGuire, I represent Rutland City.
Brenda Steady, East Milton, Westford.
Doug Bishop, Colchester.
Don Nielsen. I represent Brandon Barksdale.
Morning, Zon Eastis. I'm from Guilford and I also represent Vernon.
Excellent.
Hi, I'm Jubilee McDowell from Bridport and also represent Middlebury and Usually Valley Woodbridge.
Hi, Clayton Rager, on Essex Extension, Clayton's my constituent.
Lori Morse, committee assistant.
Thank you so much for the help, Lori.
And around to the outside of the room.
I'm Bailey Gutnick. I'm representing all person here.
Okay, great. Nice to see you. And Clayton, the floor is yours.
Well, thank you so much. And I'm going to talk a little bit about Green Mountain Transit and what we do to give you an overview, just to make sure that we're sort of setting the stage. And I'm going to be focusing primarily on Green Mountain Transit, but much of what I have to talk about is going to be relevant to the other transit agencies, because what we're seeing is that sort of the fiscal cliffs that we've been going over with the loss of COVID relief funds is impacted GMT first, but now the other agencies are catching up. And so we're all kind of facing this challenge. So just a little bit of background for me. I've been at Green Mountain Transit for 2 years. Prior to that, I was the executive director at Congress Home, which was an assisted living residence in downtown Burlington. I managed that through the first 2 years of the pandemic. Then prior to that, I was in the Agency of Human Services as the director of the Division of Licensing and Protection, which is where APS and healthcare regulation happens. And prior to that, I spent 10 years as the state's Veteran Services Director across the street at the Office of Veterans Affairs. So my background primarily has been in human services. And what excited me about coming to Green Mountain Transit is, as we heard from the chair, every place that I worked in human services, the folks that we were trying to help had challenges with transportation and getting to places. And so when I started getting burned out from the pandemic experience in a long-term care facility, I wanted to continue to provide, human services, but needed a change. And so I thought that transportation would be the great place to do that. So what I want to do first is just kind of go over what GMT does, because I think that one of the things that surprised me coming in is how complicated the public transit system is in the state. And one of the things that I didn't know at the time was that GMT is probably the most complicated public transit agency in the country. We are one of only one other transit agency outside of California that does this crazy thing of mixing rural transportation with urban transportation. These are funded separately through 2 different programs. The funds are not allowed to mix together. And so we're really like 2 separate transit agencies under the same management umbrella. Add to that, we have a seasonal service. And so what you find is that we're a small agency that does more service delivery types than just about any other, agency in the country. So before I start talking about what it is that we do, I want to throw some jargon out at you so that you can understand what I'm saying. And so when I talk about ADA service, it has to deal with the Americans with Disabilities Act, but specifically it's service that's, as I accidentally I get too expressive. So we are required, whenever we have local service, that if somebody has a disability that would prevent them from using the local service, we set up alternative transportation. And in the urban area, as you'll see shortly, that's through SSTA. In our rural areas, that's actually where we will divert the bus. NEMT is the Medicaid transportation. I think that you've probably heard from Jamie Feehan and BPTA here talking about that. And so I won't go into there. And then O&D.
Sorry, we actually haven't heard about, I'm familiar with it, but I'm not sure the rest of the whole committee is. So it would be great if you said a little bit about that non-emergency medical transportation.
Absolutely. And so Medicaid has a program that pays for non-emergency medical transportation, which is kind of, what it sounds. And, frequently this is folks who are going to dialysis. This may be folks who are going to dosing, or it could just be somebody going to an annual appointment. It's that if they're on Medicaid, if they do not have a vehicle registered in their household, then they get this door-to-door NEMT service.
Did they have to have that prior authorized, Clayton?
Yes,
Okay.
yes.
Do they do that through you or do they have to contact somebody else?
They do it through us.
Okay.
Yes. And we have to verify their eligibility requirements for the program. And then once they're enrolled in the program, we have to verify that the trip meets the program criteria.
Okay.
How long? Sorry.
Yeah, no, go ahead.
How long does that, like, let's say I've been verified and I have an appointment, how long does that process take to just like verify the?
It should be just like within a few days.
Okay.
Yeah, because what we'll do is that we have a system where we are able to log in to get DMV data. That's where we check to make sure that a household doesn't have a vehicle registered there. Now, if there is a vehicle registered there, that doesn't necessarily mean it's the end of the process. If that vehicle is broken, if that vehicle is used exclusively by somebody else, then we may look into whether they would still be eligible. And then, of course, the check with Medicaid is pretty quick. So it really should just be a few day, turnaround.
Is there a mileage limit on?
There is not. And so we have folks who are using the MET program to go to Boston. I think that on occasion it will sometimes go further for, specialized care. And so, yeah, there's especially the other providers, as you would probably expect, they do a lot more long distance traveling to get people to medical appointments, where GMT, at least in our Chittenden County operations, it's pretty much mostly local transport. SSTA does.
Yeah, go ahead.
I can see sort of a gray area for non-emergency and emergency.
Yeah.
My annual physical, my periodic checkup for follow-up for whatever is non-emergency and scheduled.
Yeah.
I'm really feeling under whether I may have the flu. Is that an emergency? I want to go see my primary. What happens?
And so we would schedule that for as soon as possible. And usually next day, shouldn't be much of an issue. And so I think that, I don't hear about it used as much for that type of service. It's usually, because what will happen is that people will, call in a month at a time and be like, here's all of my appointments. We set up all of the rides, and then they only interact with us once.
Gotcha.
And, but it can be used for one-offs.
And can the prior authorization be something that, let's just say somebody has a sort of a continuing issue, so that they need to get dialysis twice a week or 3 times a week.
Yes.
You don't have to get prior authorized each time, do you? Okay.
No, not at all. And so that's just also for a bigger picture, Vermont Public Transportation Association is the contractor that works with DEVA. They are the ones that hold the Medicaid contract. And then GMT as a member of VPTA, then that then flows through us. So it's a consolidated contract that we follow and all the other providers follow. O&D is a program for folks who are older or disabled. It used to be E&D for elderly and disabled, but we decided to use more appropriate language. And this is something for if people need to make trips that may not necessarily be a medical appointment, maybe more of a social, like they want to get to a senior center, type.
Or the methadone clinic.
Well, the methadone would probably fall under the NEMT, and where the O&D would be like, hey, I need my groceries. And,
Yeah,
yeah,
that's a biggie.
yeah. And so, and one of the things that we do in our call centers is that, there's somebody who may be getting both NEMT transportation and O&D transportation, and we take care of that for them. So looking where we operate, we operate first in Chittenden County. That's our traditional service area since 1973. When we look at what we do in Chittenden County, it's really fixed route. That's the local routes in and around the Burlington area and communities. That's the link routes connecting St. Albans and Montpelier to Burlington. That's also the Milton commuter, which we're going to be combining with the St. Albans link. And so that's sort of our urban, what we consider to be our urban system. What's important to keep in mind with Chittenden County is that the rest of the braided service in Chittenden County is actually handled by SSTA. And so they do that ADA paratransit service under contract with us. They do that O&D service under contract. And then, of course, SSTA works directly with VPTA on the Medicaid transportation. And so even though Chittenden County is our primary service, area as far as the overall number of rides, we only handle a portion of the overall public transit in Chittenden County. When you look at Washington County.
So SSTA is a completely separate organization.
Exactly. They're a separate nonprofit and we just have a contractual relationship with them.
Gotcha.
And so looking in Washington County, we do both the fixed route and all of that on-demand transportation, the O&D and NEMT. We also do the MyRide microtransit service that's right here in Montpelier. And we do the seasonal fixed route service that's in support of the Sugar Bush area.
Yes.
Yeah.
A question regarding Chittenden County and the relationship with SSTA.
Yes.
Why does it go through GMT? If you're simply contracting out to them, are they not eligible to apply for the funds directly or? Part
of it is that there's been a preference on VTrans to have the number of direct recipients be lower. And so there's that aspect. But also one of the things that makes us somewhat unique amongst the other transit providers is that since we have the only urban area, we also have the only direct funding from the federal government. And so all of the other federal funding that goes to public transportation in the state goes through VTrans and then to the provider. And so, for example, our ADA service, we'll be taking those federal funds for our fixed route service, knowing that we have a requirement to then offer that ADA service and then use those federal funds, to pay SSTA to do that.
That's part and parcel of you receiving those federal dollars.
Yes, yeah. So in Washington County, the thing is that we have the responsibility for the full braided network and seasonal. In Franklin and Grand Isle County, we have responsibility for the full braided network. Actually, I want to not forget. In Washington County, we also partner with Community Rides Vermont, which is started out of Capstone and has been a project of Chris Cole and Sue Minters. And they work with us to help us meet our on-demand transit need.
Can I ask a question? So and this is going to be very specific, but I'm trying to figure out where it would fit in the list of things that you do. And I think it probably was the O&D. So, and it's probably one of those things that you've had to cut back on, given budget cuts, but so in Waterbury, for instance, we used to have literally one of the small bus loads of people who used to come to the senior center for the once a week sort of like community congregate meal, and that doesn't happen anymore.
Yeah.
It used to be a great avenue for people who couldn't drive anymore, or didn't have a car and stuff, and it's really cut down on the ability for people to access that socialization
Yes.
and stuff.
One of the things that I would really encourage folks to do in our communities is if you've asked for something before, give us a shot again.
Uh-huh.
And one of the things that I'll pass on to the staff is that, so Monica White, who had been the
Oh, we
commissioner
know
at Dale.
Yeah.
So she now works for GMT. She's responsible for Washington County Service. And so I'm going to ask her to get in touch with you to check into that. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so one of the things that I've loved, Monica's been with us just over a year, is that, there's been some times when we've looked at or we've been asked to reduce our O&D funding. And because of Monica's background, she's been able to go in and say, well, actually, this is, more than just, a want, or there's a difference between a need and a want.
Yes, yes.
And
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, this would be an example of that. It was, and I think, to be fair, there's been over the course of, since COVID time, there's been turnover in people
yeah,
at the senior center as well. And they might not even be aware of the ability to do that. So I will try to link them up so they could think about reaching out to people who I know would like to be able to come into the senior center that one day a week, if that ends up being possible. But it's, thank you for at least enabling that conversation to happen.
absolutely. Looking at Franklin and Grand Isle County, we're responsible for service in both counties, but we contract out service in Grand Isle to Cider, which is Champlain Islanders Developing Essential Resources. And they do a great job. They're a great partner with us. And then looking at Lamoille County, our only Lamoille County service is the Stowe area seasonal support.
And do people contract, does the Stowe Area Association or do the merchants, the business owners in Stowe contract with GMT?
Absolutely.
Is that how that does? Yeah.
Yes. And so what you have for both of our seasonal areas is sort of a conglomeration between the municipality, the local chamber of commerce, the ski resort, and they all sort of pool funds together to meet that local match requirement. And so just giving you an idea of, the scale of our work, you can see urban really is where the majority of the rides are happening, not just in GMT, but with the state. And so, that's 2.3 million rides. And so that's obviously not riders because there's not 2.3 million Vermonters, but just the total number of rides that we've done. One of the things that you can see there is that we've actually sort of fully rebounded from the pandemic, doing more service than we did in 2020. Not quite as high as we were in 2013. And then you can see that of the 2.3 million rides, about 52,000 are for that ADA service that I mentioned. Looking at rural, certainly a much smaller number of rides, and we've come close to rebounding since the pandemic, but aren't quite there yet.
And what, you've highlighted what the ADA rides cost you. I'm imagining that the rural rides are probably a higher percentage than they are in terms of cost than it is of the rides.
Absolutely. And so the way, and I'm going to cover this a little bit later, but the way routes in Vermont are judged is that the state of Vermont VTrans puts out a report card. It's called the Route Performance Report. And every single individual route that operates when the state is measured and has a cost per ride to that. And so when you look at our urban service, the average cost per ride to us is about $6.15. When you look at our small town fixed route service, say like the between Barry and Montpelier, the average cost to us is about $16-17 per ride. So it's much, more expensive. When you look at the commuter rides, that's where you get into the 20s and above. It may be, it wouldn't be uncommon to have even like a $30 cost per ride for commuter service.
And this is just by way of feedback, sort of like highlighting that 2% of the rides equals 9% of the expenses for people with disabilities is sort of, putting a spotlight on something that isn't actually the highest cost
Mhm.
for you. And so I just would encourage you, in thinking about presentations to not just highlight that when, I was pretty sure that rural costs more than
Yes.
that.
Yeah, I think I had built this presentation specifically for the Transportation Committee who had questions about the costs for ADA.
Yeah.
So I should have probably, it's too much in the weeds for this overview.
It's not, it's actually not. But it's actually probably important to actually point out to the Transportation Committee that that's not where the highest cost is. The highest cost is in rural.
Yes.
And they probably know that, but we're just obviously ultra sensitive to the portrayal of people with disabilities as costing more than other people. That's
Yes. Looking at the statewide ridership, so overall, about 4.7 million rides per year, with GMT doing just over half of those, and with about half of that coming from that urban fixed route. And so looking, this is where, remember when I told you how the pots of money are separated? This is where you can see the breakout from urban and rural. I can tell you it was super frustrating that like we're cutting service in urban when we ran a small profit in rural last year. I wish that we could, intermingle the funds. One of the things that I do want to make sure that people know is that, these are our projections, and our biggest cost driver, probably won't shock any of you, is labor. And so we are actively negotiating with our largest union. We have 3 unions. Our largest union is the Teamsters Urban Drivers Union, and we're negotiating with them on their next 3-year salary. And so when we say that our budget is 51 million, that's based on our guess of where things will come out from that labor negotiations, but that's always dangerous.
So you have to deal with 3 unions. That's a
Yes.
challenge.
Yeah.
That's a challenge.
We have 3 Teamsters unions, and I have to say that I feel like we have good relations with them. But, the Teamsters have a reputation for being hard negotiators that I think is well earned. And they've had big wins at UPS, and I think that especially with the CDL labor scarcity, I think that a lot of our, workforce says that, hey, this is the time that, we're going to be able to, move up, further up into the middle class.
And when you say capital, what does that mean?
Capital means buses and bus facilities primarily.
Okay.
Yeah.
So if you needed to fix, repair, or purchase new?
It would come from there.
Yeah. Okay.
And the thing that's nice is that, and I don't really go into this too much with this presentation, is that capital budget is 80 to 90% paid for by the feds. And the operating budget is about 2/3 paid for by the feds.
Right now.
Which is scary right now.
Yeah. Go ahead, Brenda.
Will you be affected if this carbon tax gets passed? Will this really affect with the electric vehicles?
I'm not aware enough to know whether it will affect us or not, but I don't think so.
Okay.
Yeah. One of the things that's important for our federal funding is that we actually are one of the nation's highest performing public transit agencies. And so for agencies our size, which I believe is like for population areas between 50,000 and 300,000, There's about 300 agencies in that category in the country. And there's 6 measurements by which we get measured by, how much is available and how much is it used. And we get more money if we're above average. And we're above average in 4 of the 6. There's only 11% of transit agencies that are meeting above average in 4 or higher. And so that brings in about $2 million a year in extra revenue for us, which is critical. One of the biggest things that worries me about our potential service reductions is having the double whammy of providing less service, then we're less competitive on our federal competitive grant appropriations, and a $3 million loss really would then be, a $5 million loss. And when you think about a $20 million urban operating budget, that's, that would be very hard to overcome.
And are you seeing any, in this committee, we're tracking a lot of different grant losses and, potential Medicaid losses and stuff from the federal government. And what are you hearing for your federal funding, your avenue of federal funding?
So I can tell you that when it comes to our standard appropriations, we have heard nothing about changes. We do know that some of the plans that the new administration has been looking at would reduce public transit funding, but they have not acted upon those. We originally thought about 6 weeks ago that our existing grant for electric battery buses was going to be ended. And we had gotten some initial news through VTrans that program was going to be going away with the new administration. Fortunately, when reviewed at the FTA headquarters, they allowed us to proceed, which is, I was pleasantly surprised. And so those funds have not been fully obligated for this year. So really, until they're fully obligated, we won't know for certain. But we think that will be proceeding. We have had to stop our Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Committee, which we call our JEDI Committee. We're converting that to a rider engagement groups, which will largely be looking at, similar things, just with the focus on rider engagement.
And when you talk about your federal funds, and you might have said this, do all of your federal funds come through VTrans, or do some of them come directly to you?
So we get a little over 4 million direct from FTA, and then the rest comes through VTrans.
Okay.
And all of the rural funding comes through VTrans. It's only the urban funding that comes direct from FTA. I do want to let you know that if you have insomnia, we turned in a legislative report in January. It's about 500 pages. It would go into details about some of the challenges that GMT has faced long term. But really the takeaway here for you is that you may have heard or seen in the news that there's the discussion of saying, hey, we have this super complicated transit agency. Maybe this specialness is not a good specialness. And so there's work now that would have GMT have its rural service go to other providers. And so to give you the history, in 2004, GMT was called CCTA, Chittenden County Transit Authority, I think. I always forget whether it's Transportation Association or Transit Authority, but and then we had rural providers that were financially going under. And so there had been a provider here in Washington County called Wheels. They went bankrupt, stopped providing service. And 2 weeks later, GMT had service back up and running. And that was us, becoming going from just being an urban agency to being an urban and rural. And the good news is that the rural agencies are in a much better position now, even with the fiscal cliffs coming, than they were 20 years ago. And so we can see that Tri-Valley Transit, RCT, Rural Community Transportation, these are high functioning organizations that we think would be able to take over this service and be able to do so to allow GMT to sort of return to its urban focus.
So a question for you though, I mean, you said that it was the rural part that actually made a little bit of money and sort of, I guess, if you will, I know you had to keep them separately, but it's part of what keeps the organization afloat. So if you lose the rural part that is the sustaining
Mhm.
business,
Yeah.
how do you make up for that on the urban?
Well, we only are able to transfer about $300,000 a year between the rural program and the urban. So that's really the only thing that we're going to lose on the urban side by doing the transfer. One of the things that we've heard from VTrans is that they believe that by doing this transfer, it will ultimately save perhaps up to $1 million a year by having the other providers, which are able to do it at a lower cost than we can. And the thinking is that if we save them $1 million, then they would then be able to, provide us that 300,000 that we would be missing to make up for that.
So I guess the other question is, how does that impact the riders? I mean, well, the one benefit of GMTA, not the one, but one of the benefits, I should say, is that it's kind of one-stop shopping. I mean, you've been the ones who have facilitated any of the contractual arrangements that needed to be made. And so people haven't had to like, oh, I live here, I got to call there, or it's this kind of transportation. So now I call there and it's this other kind of transportation. And so then I call here. I'm just wondering about that, particularly for folks with disabilities and older Vermonters.
Yes. So from the perspective of being on the street, the only thing that will really be different from the user perspective is the logos on the vans that are picking them up. They will be calling to a different call center, but that call center will be able to tap into all of the same, sort of resources that we do now. And so we believe that it would be neutral to the user, because there's no, for example, like the OND program is not going to change where it's operating. The NEMT is not going to change where it's operating. So it's not like there will be a service area that will stop getting service now that previously had received it.
So it's kind of the overhead part that you folks had
Yes.
that will be reduced. So, okay, kind of taking out the middleman a little bit, I guess you might say.
Perhaps, and also, the thing that does drive our labor costs is that, the highest cost labor pool is in Burlington.
Right.
And then having our labor pool sort of attached to that Burlington means that, of course, our rural folks think, well, hey, we should get paid, the same amount that, that Burlington does. And so I think that, I know that strategy has led to higher pay in the rural areas that, that the other providers are
Can't
not.
blame them. I mean,
I can't blame them at all. It's exactly what I would be doing.
exactly, right?
So I think that that's probably the thinking, that having us, involved in rural does change the economics a bit.
And you might have said this at the beginning, I might have missed it. Is GMT, are you a for-profit, not-for-profit?
We're a municipality.
You're a municipality.
Government.
Interesting.
Yes.
Government of the.
I would never have thought of that.
And, there's some days I'm happy about that, and other days I'm really not.
So you have a board of directors of some sort,
We have a board of commissioners.
commissioners, okay?
Yep, there's 28 of them. And
Goodness.
And so, and what I love is that as a municipality, when you look at our statute, in our urban area, we have assessment authority. And so,
As a municipality, you can tax people.
yes. And so that means that when it comes to our local, like, hey, Burlington, this is how much you have to pay for your transit, we issue that to them. In the rural areas, we don't have that authority, which means that we have to go out and shake the bushes,
Yeah, town meeting. I see it every year on town meeting.
Yeah.
Yes.
And frankly, I think that that's one of the areas that GMT has failed. Because we're a municipality, we don't have to go out and beg, we just issue a bill. And so when we migrated into rural, we never really spent the time cultivating the local relationships as much as I think that we should have. And so like one of the things, we'll just use Washington County, for example. If Tri-Valley Transit comes in, my expectation is that they're probably going to bring in additional administrative staff. And that their model would be that there would be one person in Washington County focused exclusively on recruiting volunteers, because that brings the cost down, because those Medicaid trips can be done by volunteers. And then another person exclusively focused on going to the municipalities and the hospitals and the large human service organizations saying, hey, we would like to do this van for you to your senior center. Here's what the cost would be, for the local match. And, GMT just hasn't had a culture really of doing that.
Mhm.
And it has been more like, hey, Berlin, this is how much we think you should give us, and please give it to us. But if you don't, we're still going to provide service.
So when is this change supposed to happen?
Potentially, if everything goes through, which there's a lot to still figure out, it would be July 1st of 2026.
Okay, so a year from now.
Yeah.
Yeah, go ahead, Doug.
Couple of questions. The shedding, if you will, of the rural aspect of your work,
Mhm.
that would not impact the fact that you currently meet 4 of the 6.
It would not at all.
That's just specific to inner city or city
It's
city
just
transit.
specific to the transit that happens in the urban zone designated by the census.
And then with respect to this municipality status and your taxpayers,
Mhm,
which are the towns,
mhm.
were they all brought in? How did they get brought into your municipality? I assume voluntarily at one
Yes.
point. And then if you want to serve a new town,
And so in the statute lays out how we could bring in new members. And also lays out how we can lose members. And so, for example, last year, Heinsberg decided, you know what? If we transfer service from GMT to Tri-Valley Transit, then they can't assess us.
Oh.
And so they decided to leave, GMT and get their service from Tri-Valley Transit. What you have now with the service cuts that I'll be talking about next is that some of our smaller members are like, we don't like the idea of our service potentially being cut and having to pay the same amount. And so I know that like one of our other urban members is thinking about separating, out of GMT. Now, the thing is once they leave GMT, we can still provide service there. For example, like Colchester is not a member of GMT, but we still provide service there. And the town manager for Colchester is a former assistant general manager for GMT. I think that he's done a very good job of setting Colchester up to have like the maximum, benefit for the least cost.
well, I had a sense that there was more of a negotiation
Yeah,
going on,
yes.
and I didn't realize we weren't a member of the
Yes.
municipality.
And so
That's-
if I go to Aaron in Colchester and say, hey, I want to, cut this route, he's like, okay, well, then I'm not going to give you as much money, and I have to then negotiate with him. Where with the, other providers, yeah, I cut this route, sorry. And, but we still need your money. So if you are, like I said, if you are bored and want to read about the interworkings of GMT's history, there's a legislative report that I can provide you, and it's on the Transportation Committee's website. Here's the rural transfers that we've been talking about with that potential July 2026 happening.
So was this something that was initiated by V-Trans? Was it something that kind of like, GMT, V-Trans, the legislature kind of all came to the same conclusion, or
So there was
something being done to you, or is this something you're like willfully going along with?
I would say it's being done to us and we're willfully going along.
Okay.
And so just prior to my arrival, there was a leadership crisis at GMT. We had a leadership committee or a leadership team there, and this is employees, not the commissioners, of 6 folks, and 4 of them had their letters of resignation in. And so that got a lot of people's attention, as I'm sure that you can imagine. There were negotiations with those four. All four of them remained. And but that triggered an organizational assessment where we brought in outside consultants to look at the work culture, to look at the amount of work that we were asking people to do. And one of the things that we saw was that over the past 15 years, our admin staff had been decreased by 42%. And so every time we had a financial crisis, we wouldn't cut service, we wouldn't cut union positions, we'd cut admin. And as you could imagine, for those admin folks that stayed, that it just meant that work was more and more difficult. And it frankly, it meant that we were no longer able to be a good partner with VTrans. And so that we had this organization assessment that just basically said that, you know, that the GMT staff were being tasked to do too much with the resources that they have. That then led the state to make a decision of, okay, do we bump up GMT or do we transfer service to, you know, the other providers? And the decision was to transfer service to other providers. And what I can say is that, like, I'm not happy with this process because I can't be happy with a process where, you know, about a little between a third and a half of my employees who I value and love working with, they're going to go someplace else. So I can't be happy about that, but I think that it's probably the best, you know, solution for Vermont in the sense that, you know, the reality is that where we're providing the most rides, the 2.5 million, is where we're also not spending a whole lot of effort in managing it because the rural transit's actually much more complicated than urban transit.
I find it interesting because, you know, like you said, CCTA was sort of, you know, out here. And then we did have another rural transit organization, like I can remember in Washington, Lamoille counties, that was failing.
Yep.
And, you know, really CCTA sort of like, as you know, took that over and rebranded as Green Mountain Transit. And I'm a little anxious, to be honest, about that happening again, with insufficient support for the rural transportation aspects of it.
Yes.
And so, you know, I mean, we're a little bit not bystanders, but we're kind of the people that we have responsibility for in this committee are, I guess I would call, you know, fairly good sized recipients of that rural transportation side of things. And so we have a lot at stake in understanding what the implications are for this. I just know from, you know, when CCTA took over, I'm trying to remember what it was called. I remember the Washington Lamoille piece of it and a little bit of Orange County, I think it was, that it was failing. I mean, it was going under. And so, you know, it was before your time, but it took over a organization that, you know, hopefully we're not going to repeat that by slicing off the rural transportation. Hopefully the other folks are going to be able to deal with that.
One of the things that I will say that I'm happy with is that because we're a municipality, we have our service area set in statute, unlike the other providers. We are getting that amended with this year's transportation bill. And the way it's worded is that it would not force a change to happen if we, you know, get 6 months into this and realize, hey, this is actually not going to make any sense. But it would also keep the door open if we needed to come back, you know, in the future. And so, because I would not want, you know, transit's a cyclical, you know, type industry.
Sure.
And I would want to make sure that, you know, we may be the ones struggling now, but, you know, 10, 15 years from now, it may be, you know, reversed again.
And so these other organizations are not municipalities.
They're nonprofits.
And so how come there's a difference? I don't understand.
Well, I think that the reason why the difference was, it goes back to when the private bus company that had been serving Burlington up through the 60s, they failed. And so when they created our statute in 73, I think that they thought that, you know, a municipality was the right, you know, way to do that. And instead of through a nonprofit. it's interesting because I talked to some legislators and they're like, that's horrible. You should be a nonprofit. I, talk to others who think that's great, and so I think that there's pros and cons to it.
I don't have an opinion about it. It was news to me when you said it earlier today, so I didn't know that you were a municipality. I was just trying to figure out why the difference, but lots of times we learn about things in this building that go back, decades.
Yes. I do want to just, with the interest of time,
Yeah.
make sure that I get to the service reductions. And so,
We don't want you to get that part.
Yeah.
I don't want to get to that part. It's the least favorite part of my job. So, so over the past year, because of our financial condition, we have reduced about $1 million worth of our annual operating costs. I have to be thankful to the administration because it probably would have been closer to 2 million without additional support from them this year. And I will say that I don't like cutting any service. To give you an example, at our first public meeting last August, we had proposed eliminating a single run that goes from Pine Street to the downtown transit center each day because it only averaged 3 riders. Well, guess who was at the public meeting? One of those 3 riders. And they proceeded to tell us about how complicated their day was going to be if we cut that early morning run. And so you can't cut service without impacting people's lives. It just can't happen. But I will say that the changes that we've done so far have really been focused on those routes that economically I'm not sure we can justify. And so, for example, the only route that we've eliminated is the Jeffersonville commuter. That connected Jeffersonville to downtown Burlington. It cost us on average $63 per ride. That's just not something that we can, afford to do. When it averaged about 20 riders a day, most of those folks were students or working at the hospital, and so it's like, we hate that, impacted those, folks, but we just can't spend $63, a ride. So most of the changes that have happened so far have really been in those areas where we've had underperforming routes. What worries me is that we have a $3 million gap next year, and without any type of intervention, this means that we are really going to be cutting economically efficient service. It means that we will probably not have much more service beyond our major core, routes. We probably won't have weekend service. We probably will stop very early in the day. And really those link services, which, we already know that the cost per rider are in the $20s and $30, will probably be something that we can no longer afford. So this is the worst case scenario. The good news is that VTrans, as they did with fiscal year 26, they said, hey, we really want to help you. If you can get it down to 1.5 million, maybe we can, provide 1.5 million. I appreciate that assistance. I will just say that, I feel that really any further reductions besides the ones that are already planned for, probably would be cutting good transit. And I'm hesitant to that. And I also know that the administration may have the desire to fund it, but they may not, be able to with their own constraints, just because, in addition to our urban gap, there's a rural gap, and VTrans may just not have the ability to pay for everybody.
So can I ask a question? I'm wanting to make sure I understand the urban and the rural. So when you say reduction or elimination of commuter link connecting rural Vermont to Chittenden County, if you're going to Chittenden County, it's still counted as an urban link?
Yes.
Okay,
So that,
not a rural service.
exactly.
Okay,
Now, one of the things that we may be negotiating with VTrans about is, hey, let's call it a rural service, so that then you all, are funding it with rural funds instead of just relying on urban funds, to pay for the service.
well, so that's
That's something that we'll be working on with them,
okay.
because as you can probably imagine, I would like them to pay more. And, every good bureaucrat would like more money, of course. And one of the things that I want to make sure that you all are aware of, and this is not meant to be a criticism of V-Trans or the Transportation Committee, but transit is measured by economic efficiency. That doesn't necessarily, mean where it's needed for human services. And so I'm going to give you an example. Last year's route performance report showed that the number 11 route in the Burlington area was underperforming. The cost per passenger was too high. That's the only route that goes by the Chittenden County Methadone Clinic. I'm not going to cut that route, but the problem is that I'm being measured based on economic efficiency. So when I don't cut that route, it looks like I'm, not trying to save money. And so that's where I think that you all may need to interject, because not just GMT, but all the transit agencies are going to be, having their routes measured by the economics, and the economics may not be the only factor that matters.
Yeah, go ahead, Brenda.
Do you ever coordinate with SSTA? Because they do a lot of transport to the methadone clinic.
Absolutely. And
Maybe they could pick it up.
yes. And
I have another question.
I'm sorry, right?
Sorry, so to that point, Clayton, do your performance measures or your data gathering,
Mhm.
does that kind of highlight, like, depending on the route and what other
Mhm.
important factors are there to be considered? So if we were to ask for that information, it would, like, do you have that information readily available?
I can say that we're trying to build that because it hasn't been something that's been looked at before. And certainly I want to make sure that if we are in that cutting mode next year, that those are the factors that we have to, consider as well as the economics.
Go ahead.
When there are service changes, are there proactive efforts to work with others who may be able to jump in and help in an area? I'm thinking you referenced Jeffersonville. Most of the people riding that
Yep.
were coming to the hospital or the university.
Yep.
Katma serves Chittenden, but those are people coming to Chittenden County.
Yep.
Is there a handoff to Katma to try to organize ride shares and things like that? Or
And so the handoff actually was, I think V-Trans did a really great job of promoting alternatives when we identified that route. And so you actually had V-Trans coordinators riding the route and would tell people as they were getting on and off, hey, we have carpools, we have van pools, we have these other things that we would be able to support you, if when this route goes away. And so that does happen. We also, wherever we can, seek to transfer service instead of eliminating service. And so I think that that's, something that we would want to find like an alternative. And so again, with the Jeffersonville commuter, we reached out to RCT and was like, hey, we can't cost effectively do this with our labor constraints. Is this something that you all would be able to do cheaper? They did the analysis. Sorry, we're not able to. So there are, things that are looked at before cutting. We also go through a public meeting process. And so we had 9 public meetings before cutting the Jeffersonville commuter where, people were able to come and talk to us. And then we were also able to provide them information about, alternatives.
I mean, and then of course, we're eyeing up cuts, the economic reasons. Are there conversations with, for example, Chittenden Regional Planning for where future growth is? As you get ready, I was just at an event where there was the new apartments came online at Cavalry Apartments over in the Fort in Colchester. 65 new units coming online. So what's the interplay between sort of future growth and planning?
And so what I can say is that we do work with CCRPC on that, but our commissioners are in the urban area are appointed by the municipalities. And so we work directly with the municipalities on a lot of those items. I do want to not seen that. Our target that was set by the transportation committees was 10%. For income, we're at 9.7. And so we Our board has proactively, said that we would like that income target to be 15%. And so that likely means that we will be looking at a fare increase in 2026. Our current fares are $2 for full price, $1 for folks who are older, younger, or disabled, and $4 for that ADA paratransit service that I was mentioning. One of the things that I would think that you would be interested to know is a little over half of our riders receive that discounted rate. And the other thing is that, and about half of our riders have their service paid for by somebody else. So if I'm a UVM student, the University of Vermont pays for mine. If I'm we're very happy that we'll be bringing on the hospital so that they'll be paying for the transit for like all of their employees. And so we like to, whenever possible, have the transit paid by, an organization other than the rider.
And that's about half the riders.
Yeah. And lastly, and this gets to really where I hope to, be back in front of you regularly in the future. We are creating a affiliated nonprofit. One of the reasons why we want to do that is because we think that there's great opportunity for grants that would connect transit with human services. And so I know a lot of those grants require, applicants to be nonprofits. And so we're awaiting IRS 501c3 and really, I understand that we're not going to be able to have GMT, the standard is focusing on economically efficient service, where the nonprofit, for my mind, is going to be how we try to address the non-economically efficient service that we still, have needs for. And that is all I have. So I'm sorry that it took longer to go through.
No, it was perfect.
Kept asking you questions.
I know, right? It was, I wanted to thank Teo because he sort of helped put this on our radar, and it was actually really, really helpful for us to understand more the sort of inner workings of something that we talk about in this committee, because transportation for people who aren't driving, have never driven, used to drive, for whatever reason, understanding the challenges that they might have, but also the opportunities that they have, and understanding how the landscape is changing, so we're not kind of like you're scratching our heads is really important. So thank you for that.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Appreciate it. And good luck with the rest of the session. I know that you all are chewing on super hard things. When I was young and naive, I used to fantasize about becoming a legislator when I retired. And now I'm like, no.
Thank you so much. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
Okay, committee, we're now going to shift gears, and this is in relationship to H30, which is an act. And again, this is background information for us as we sort of gear up for what we will probably be working on next session, which is an act relating to the use of seclusion and restraint on children and youth in the custody of the Department for Children and Families. And so we are lucky to be joined, I see, by Liz Mitchell, who was I was expecting. Good. It's all good. We know what's happening. Okay, there's Shelley. Okay, there we go. Okay. So Liz, you can keep your camera on too. I just, but yes, so we're talking, folks. You might recall at last week's testimony, an example was given about the Howard Center and the program that they have, I think at Park Street, was the name of it, that serves youth, and how they serve youth and make minimal use of any restraint or seclusion. And so we felt like we could learn from them about how they achieve that. And then also, we will hear from Kelly Bushy from Connected Circles, another organization that serves youth, that really focuses on positive supports. And so thank you for being here, both of you. We appreciate it. And We're going to do a quick round of introductions because I think it's always important for you to know who's in the room and what parts of the state you're speaking with. So my name is Teresa Wood and I'm from Waterbury and I also serve Bolton, Buell's Gore, and Huntington. Go this direction.
Hi, I'm Ray Garofano. I live in Essex and I also represent Essex.
I'm Jubilee McGill from Bridport and represent Middlebury, New Haven, and Weybridge as well.
Good morning. My name is Zon Eastis. I live in Guilford and I also represent Vernon.
Good morning, I'm Todd Nielsen, I represent Brandon Forestdale.
Good morning, Doug Bishop. I represent Colchester's Chittenden 20 district.
Brenda Steady, East Milton, Westford.
Hi, good morning. Eric McGuire, represent Rutland City.
Good morning, Dan Noyes. I represent Woolkit, Hyde Park, Johnson, and Belvedere.
Ann Donahue. Oh, sorry, I didn't see that you were up there.
Yeah.
Hello. Ann Donahue from Northfield, also representing Berlin.
And Lori over here. First off, I wanted to thank you for being available on relatively short notice to speak with us this morning. We really appreciate it. And that right now we don't have anybody else in the room, but that could change. We have people walking through the door all the time. So thank you both for being here. So please introduce yourselves and the floor is yours. We are interested to hear more about your program.
I'm Liz Mitchell. I'm the Director of Children's Home and Community Programs at Howard Center, and I oversee Park Street as well as Jared House, which is our crisis stabilization program. And I'm just here to support Shelley.
Oh, yes, and I'm Shelley McGinnis, and I am Howard Center's Program Director for the Park Street program and the Faye Honeynott Memorial School. And we provide residential treatment for adolescent males who have engaged in sexually problematic behavior. And I thank you so much for inviting me to this opportunity, something that I'm pretty passionate about in the work that I've done here in our program. So again, it's my understanding today that I've been invited here to really speak about our history with the use of seclusion and restraint. Maybe I should just start by saying that I've been with the program since 1992 when we opened. So I've got a length of history in terms of how we transitioned from a place of once starting out having used restraint to no longer doing so. But first and foremost, I also want to make it clear that I'm also a member of the Vermont Coalition of Residential Providers. And while I want to acknowledge that Park Street, and I hope to be able to tell our story, how we got to this place, I want to be really clear that I really speak for our program only, and I have the deepest respect for my colleagues in other residential programs across the state who may feel the need to continue to utilize restraints in their residential settings to ensure client safety. Because, when I speak about this, this was a very significant investment on our part to make a shift. And there's a lot of things that come along with that to really make that happen. So, and I guess I wanted to say that when we decided to make a shift to move to being really a hands-off program, that was a choice we made, and it comes with its own liabilities and risks as well. Because I try to think about how to best describe this, and really the word that I came up with, the youth in our care, if you will, they have the freedom to explode. And I say that in a way that I'm gonna apologize. I say that in a way that I'm going to get into the whole point of where it's super important to have this level of investment where your staff are really equipped with the skills and the training to be able to manage that kind of an environment. So we made this shift when it was really foreign to not restrain kids, the concept. And it really came from a really strong philosophical belief. So when we opened the program back in, again, 92, under the leadership of Michael Gray, he came to us with years of experience in residential programming, and he helped design our buildings. And he was really clear at that time, we are not going to create a program with seclusion rooms. And it was coming from a place of, again, his philosophical belief at that time was that behavior is a form of communication, and that kids that are going to come into our care just don't have the skills to be able to shift that behavior. And it is our responsibility and our job to help these kids gain the skills that they need to be able to step down from this higher level of care, reintegrate back into their community settings, into their homes that are not going to have the same opportunity to, seclude kids. So that is really kind of the first thing. We've never had that built into our program. However, we did, it was still our aim at the time to use TCI, which is a model where we were trained in therapeutic crisis intervention training, which included physical intervention. And it was at our aim at the time to really use those de-escalation skills to have restraint be a last resort to keep our kids safe. But really, what we discovered, over time was that in doing so, with collecting data and really looking closely at those incidents, it was really about kids being non-compliant when we were putting hands on kids, and times when the adults really felt like it was important to take control of situations so that our intentions were the best at the time, certainly because our goal was to ensure that we were making sure kids were not going to harm themselves and harm other people. But in reality, what was happening was, staff were getting hurt, kids were getting hurt, and it was really going, again, against our philosophical belief that we needed to better understand what was the underlying cause of their behavior and work to teach them new skills to better manage the stressors that they were experiencing day to day. So from that point forward, we really invested in debriefing, our behavioral incidents with kids and staff daily so that we could learn from each other what was needed to really shift our culture. And what I would say at this point in time, I was trying to think when we made that shift, it had to have been at least 15, 20 years ago now. It's been a long time. And so I think about like our course of learning and the things that we currently have in place to continue to have the success that we have today with not having to restrain kids. And I just want to speak to maybe some models that we have built into our program that helps guide us. So
can I ask you a question?
Yeah.
Sorry for interrupting, but it's one of those things that pops into my head because this is something that we hear all the time. We hear it from schools, we hear from, other people. And so I am in
adopted of best practice models that we follow and we stay true to be able to shift our not needing to put hands on, because it feels if you don't have the skill set as staff, then it feels very chaotic, out of control, and unsafe. It really does. And that's hard. That's a very hard place to be as a staff member responsible for these kids in your care. And you want nothing more to make sure that people aren't going to get hurt when they are acting out aggressively, damaging property, just having like the most violent outbursts and temper tantrums, if you will, right? So that feels very scary. But what we did is, again, we tried to, we adopted these models. I think one of the key things is we've always had an in-house trainer who is trained in a lot of these models, and that person is our program supervisor, if you will, that supervises then our other supervisors, who then have a responsibility to provide ongoing supervision and guidance and mentoring of our staff to fully implement the skills of these models to shift going to non-restraint. And so it's really, yeah, it's a big investment. And so the models, I think it will speak to maybe answering some of your questions. So like the one I wanted to say is, so we really adopted a collaborative problem solving model. Okay. And that's the piece of really being able to understand that model. And we use Ross Green's collaborative problem solving and proactive solutions to guide us, where we then learn to understand what are the lagging skills that kids have that us as adults need to respond differently to help them not have these crises. So I'll give you a concrete example. So we might have kids, for example, this is very common. So when it comes to nighttime and settling in for their bedtime routines, that's a really hard time because they're alone with their thoughts at night, right? And their minds are racing. And so a lot of times nighttime is a hard time. So that doing this collaborative problem solving, we have a better understanding of what a kid might need to feel more regulated in their bodies to settle in for the night. And that requires us to listen, pay attention, and create a good nighttime routine for them. That does require, again, I have a very good staffing structure that requires like our staffing to be available to attend to those individual needs of kids. The next thing I would say is that was super important in this shift is to become trauma informed so you can be trauma responsive. And we adopted 3 different models that we use here at Park Street. One is the Attachment Regulation and Competency Model. It's called ARC by Margaret Blostein. We use, recently, we've taken advantage of the opportunity of the Resource Parenting Curriculum and Trauma-Informed Parenting Skills, RPC Plus, which is offered for residential programs, which is offered by the Vermont Child Welfare Partnership. And we also use the Sensory Motor Arousal Regulation Treatment, it's SMART, from Boston's Trauma Center. And that's paired with, we also have, instead of seclusion rooms, we have what's called regulation spaces built into both our school and our residents. And the outcome of those models teach us some examples, teach us some of the following. One, it teaches us to have, you have to be really attuned to yourself as a staff member. You have to have self-awareness and a knowledge of when you're not at your best and what does your best look like. And so one of our mantras of what we have to always be asking ourselves is, how do I want the child to experience me in this moment? And your answer should always be as a safe, caring, trusting adult. Mm-hmm. And so we then also focus on relational work is so important. The other thing that really differentiates us from some programs is that we're a longer term program. So we have time to build relationships with these kids. So they, and we do this by, sharing like interest and seeing them for kids and not for their behaviors, and modeling for them ways to regulate themselves. And so, and then we also have like to build up their competency, which is super important. We offer opportunities around giving them normalcy. And so things that are important to them in their lives, to give them purpose and goals to work towards, not engaging in the same behavior and becoming a new healthier me we talk about. And so like, for example, like I just enrolled a kid this week in a fire cadet program, and he's going to work to become, his goal is to become a fireman. We have kids that play on AAU basketball teams. We have kids that volunteer in our community, things like that. So we really try to, it's a lot of individualized programming. The next thing we have built in, when I talked about like those regulation spaces, which also transfers across, not just in those spaces, but they can have this availability built into programming throughout their day, is body-based interventions that they can use. So things like drumming and squeeze machines and weighted blankets and aromatherapy and those kinds of things. The next model that we use is called Nonviolent Communication Model by Marshall Rosenberg. And that model really helps us to design our individualized support crisis plans. And what we're looking at there is better to understand their needs and their emotions. So what are the underlying needs that drive, for example, some of the things that we built into kids' plans are a kid who said to us, I just need calm and quiet when you see me being energized and I'm struggling to focus. So when we see those antecedent type behaviors, we're going to build in an ability to give him calm and quiet. And that looks different for different kids. Or we have a kid who says, I just need to be heard when I'm being defiant because it means I don't understand. I feel stupid. Okay, well then we're going to pull you aside and we're going to listen to you and we're going to give you some better tools to help you understand and learn. Or we have a kid who says, I just need patience because I'm overwhelmed when you see me start to yell and swear. Okay, again, we'll pull you aside and we'll just try to listen more and get you back to that place. Another thing we have is restorative circles. We built in, and that's another important concept because it allows us to have a safe space to problem solve concerns and develop united solutions. And this is really peer driven. So this is where peers hold themselves accountable. They have an opportunity to really offer suggestions and help support one another, but also listen to the significant incidents in the way in which they might have impacted one another. And then I already spoke to, we have, our trainer now is TCI non-physical intervention trained through Cornell University. And we have a number of de-escalation, strategies that he teaches us to be able to build that into programming. Like, for example, maybe we need to offer a caring gesture to a kid because we see they're sad and we say, hey, it seems like you're really sad right now. Would you like to go for a walk? Rather than waiting until it escalates to something more. Or maybe we need to manage the environment differently because transitions are really hard for kids. And so how do we set that up differently so transitions go smoother? Another thing I would say that's been key in our philosophical belief is that our residential milieu staff need to be clinically involved. It's a we approach here from the top down. We're all in it together, and we create a very strong sense of team here. And that really helps them, the staff, also have purpose and meaning and feel heard, that the skills that they need, we're going to be responsive to that. And that they best understand the kids because they're working with them day in and day out. And then I already said this earlier, but have a built-in trainer that knows these models inside and out, that supports your leaders to support your staff. We also are fortunate to have strong collaboration with our youth, our local teams, making sure that parents are involved. We have intensive family therapy, so families are involved and giving us guidance and ideas. DCF is involved, GALs, the Department of Mental Health, the schools. How do these, entities help us too? DCF is there for us when we say, hey, we need some one-to-one funding, to be able to help a particular kid who's really kind of the acuity of care is so high that it's really negatively impacting our milieu. Or they will, they'll help support us if a kid just needs to take a break away from the program and maybe come back. Or,
Shelley?
Yep.
Can I ask a question? Because when you're talking about DCF and the support, and obviously that, this bill that we're, considering is a bill that would impact DCF.
Mhm.
What kind of data do you keep now? It sounds like you're very data informed in terms of, what you track, and I'm wondering, what kind of data do you keep that's internal versus the kind of data that you submit to the department in terms of, any kind of situation that might come up where, despite all of your like incredible efforts and the training that you provide, something happens and you end up, with a restraint for some youth. I mean, what kind of data are you used to reporting, and what kind of data do you keep there locally that you may not report?
Right, I can speak to that, but I want to be clear that we don't ever put hands on kids, so we would never restrain a kid here.
Never. Okay,
no.
never.
Never. So if a
You
kid
give me
reported-
hope. I have to tell you, you give me hope. I'm just saying that. I have to say it out loud. Yeah.
So yeah, if a kid reaches a level where they're going to require that level of intervention, the other thing I would say is strong collaboration with our police department. Not all residential programs have that, but at Rutland City Police Department, we have a very strong working relationship with them. And our local mental health agency, which also supports us. So that's important. You got to have a solid support network wrapped around you to help embrace what we're doing as well. So in terms of reporting out, yes, we have to report out. So when we have a behavioral situation that happens, because we do, believe me, and we use all these interventions, that is all well documented and sent off to DCF. We have being licensed as a through RLSI, we're required to report those incidents. So those incidents get reported to parents, they get reported to DCF. Yeah, I don't know if that answered your question, but
It actually did, yeah.
Their DCF workers get those reports in writing from us.
Okay. Thank you. We have another question.
Yeah, go ahead.
With respect to, so never hands-on, so there isn't restraint data to report. But you said when there is a behavioral issue, it's documented and sent to DCF. What type of behaviors would require documentation, and then what level of behaviors would warrant reporting to DCF?
Yep. So that's a good question. So so we would have so for example, like a behavior might be a kid who is maybe I'm trying to think about in terms of their own self first. Let me start there. So kids who might be, making threats to engage in self-harm, for example, or are engaging in some sort of, self-harm, or kids who are making threats to run off campus, or kids who are destroying property, or kids who have made, threats to harm, another youth or a staff member, or kids who like their incidents of their incidents of I just lost my train of thought here. Yeah, anyway, you get the gist of it. But yes, those kinds of behaviors. Yes, go ahead.
You said you don't use any restraint. What happens when students hitting a staff member, which I've seen? How do you stop that with no touching?
So I'm gonna say this is where it's hard sometimes to really wrap your head around this, but it's really, I do believe, like, we don't have kids that run from Park Street. We don't have kids that will engage in those physical altercations. And I think it's really the relational piece works, but also if we had to, what we would do, like if a kid was making a threat to go after, say, another kid, this is one of the things where that we have to manage the environment. So we'd have a staff that's going to step in, between the two of them, not necessarily, they're not going to put hands on them, but we're going to ask the other kids we're going to ask the staff to get the other kids out of the environment, out of the situation. And another staff's going to step in, and we're going to kind of be there verbally with both of those kids and are able to redirect them. And why I say about the relational work is the relational work really helps because then the kids have trust and faith in us as the individuals to like that, you know, we're going to keep them safe and we're going to help them work through that situation. But yeah, I mean, knock on wood, we don't have kids that have like.
That's amazing, because I've seen it
assaulted
in
each
public
other.
schools. That's
That-
amazing that it doesn't happen.
I think, you know, what I feel like what we're learning from you is that when they first arrive there, they might not understand this, but it seems like they learn it pretty quickly, these youth,
Culture.
that this is a safe place for them and that they will be listened to, and they learn pretty quickly that you'll help them learn new ways to deal with their emotions, that and regulating their you know, the issues that arise in them. And that takes an intense amount of training for your staff, and intense awareness of that, and the right kind of supervision and support. So like I said, you give me hope that there's you know, there's definitely opportunities for all of us to learn from the success that you've had. And I appreciate you sharing the approach that you use there at Park Street here, and other people notice it. So that's how we came to learn about you. So I just want you to know that. Go ahead, Representative Bishop, and then we do need to wrap up this testimony because we have another witness.
And I'm not sure how much this is, where the question is in this, but Park Street runs a program, very specific set of youth that you're supporting. Yet you're describing behaviors that I do think are exhibited increasingly in other settings by youth, including schools. And while schools, I think and hope and believe, have hands-off policies, it's challenging to envision how the staff writ large has the level of intense training and supports that you share exist at Park Street. So I guess it's an observation and a concern about the supports needed for youth in a broader array of settings in today's world than may have existed previously.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. In fact, the summary that you had given previously there was really my summary at the end. It's really like if you were to interview kids, they would tell you exactly as you just described. Like they quickly discover that this is a safe place for them, and they quickly understand that they're gonna be heard. And I think if you were to, and this is where like RLSI comes in, like when they come and they interview our kids and they learn to understand that, because our kids will speak to that, the difference, you know, in setting. But the thing that I would talk about that's really important, I know, just want to end by saying that we are very unique in who we are, right? We're a small program. The maximum kids we can serve is 10. We have, again, an excellent staffing structure because we serve a very high-risk population of kids who've engaged in sexually problematic behavior, which requires another heightened level of supervision. So we have the capacity to do these intensive interventions in a very different way, in a very small milieu. And not all of our programs across the state have those opportunities. They don't have the resources. They don't have the infrastructure. They might have, they might be our crisis stabilization programs that are very short-term for kids. So because I speak to what it looks like for Park Street, that may not, I just want to be really clear, that may not transfer over in the same way into other settings like school, like you spoke about schools too. So anyway, I hope it's helpful. But I also just want to acknowledge that it's a big investment.
It is. But worth it, I think, I think
for sure.
We definitely can learn some things from you today, and I appreciate that. And don't be surprised if, when we take up this bill next session, if we call you back, and be thinking about, if possible, and if, all the permissions work out, we would love to hear from some youth in your program
Yeah.
as well, if they are willing and, all the necessary provisions, and permissions happen. But thank you so much for being here this morning, Shelley, and Liz, for supporting Shelley in that. She didn't need any support. She did great. Thank you so much for sharing your experiences and the efforts that you're making there. I'm sure make a big difference to the youth that you're serving. So thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you so much. Thanks for the opportunity.
Awesome. Thanks.
All right.
And next we're joined by Kelly Bushy from Connected Circles, another program I was made aware of. And thank you for being here, Kelly. Appreciate it. The floor is yours. We're in a learning mode here about how through positive supports youth can be supported, and we are not taking up this bill per se right this moment, but we are sort of laying the groundwork for work next session on an act relating to the use of seclusion and restraint for children in the custody of DCF. So we appreciate you being here and would love to hear more about your program.
Great. So thanks for inviting me. I'm just going to put this disclaimer out that public speaking is not my forte, but
okay.
I'm here. I've prepared a statement, and often what we say to our youth here, right, is we can do hard things. And so I'm here to do some hard things, and that's to speak to all of you today.
Okay.
So I am the director and founder of Connected Circles. We are a new therapeutic independent. Oh no.
We can hear you.
Oh, sorry. Okay.
I don't know what happened on your end, but we can hear and see you. So
Right. Okay. A new therapeutic independent school here in Berlin, Vermont. We serve 12 students between the ages of 12 and 22 who are often developmentally much younger. Our focus at Connected Circles is connection over compliance. Relationships with today's youth take priority. We believe and strive to offer a community where all are seen, nurtured, and encouraged to embrace lifelong learning. Prior to Connected Circles, I was a special ed director for many years within the public school system. Through my professional experiences, I am able to see and understand the perspective of both public schools and independent schools. We are in the final weeks of our second full official school year at Connected Circles. We have been in operation for 3 years, gaining our approval through the State Board of Education in March of 2023. Since this time, we have only needed to utilize physical restraint on 2 occasions and have never utilized seclusion. The first incident was when a student reported having a gun in his backpack and ran to get it. In order to maintain safety for all of the students and staff within our community, we used a restraint to manage this youth. The second incident was when a youth physically went after a staff member. For us, physical restraint is a last resort and for the purpose of safety only. However, we do have 2 Handle with Care trainers on our staff, and our full staff is trained annually in this practice with a primary focus on de-escalation. Anytime that we need to use physical restraint, a comprehensive report is written by those directly involved using the guidelines set forth by law and the Agency of Education. We also conduct an after-action review. It includes all staff, and we approach it with curiosity. Curiosity around what the adults could have done differently that may have avoided the need for a restraint. We process the incident and work to repair the relationship with the youth and other members of our community that have been impacted, both students and staff. If we have identified areas in which the staff could have responded differently, we assume responsibility for this and we process it with the youth. The students we serve are referred to us through the special ed process within Vermont Public Schools. They come from various backgrounds and caregiver situations. Some are in DCF custody, others are living with grandparents or biological parents, have pending court cases or truancy or property destruction cases, or have returned to Vermont after being in out-of-state residential treatment programs. Every single one of the students we support has experienced significant adversity throughout their young lives, and some still go home to stressful environments every day. Often, by the time they come to Connected Circles, it is after a long period in which public schools have tried many different strategies and approaches to support them. Many have been restrained multiple times within their previous educational experiences. When students have come to us from programs in which the use of restraint is a regular practice, it can be incredibly challenging to help the student understand that we are not going to restrain them here and why. It takes many consistent positive experiences to build a trusting relationship and undo what these youth have learned by being restrained. One example of the latter is a youth that has recently transitioned to us from an out-of-state residential program in which restraint was used regularly to manage their behavior. Unfortunately, we have not been able to access the data regarding these restraints. They have not been made available to us. We are working very hard to build trust and to reassure him that we will not restrain him. When he arrived, and many times we have explained to him that we would only hold him if he were to be at risk to himself or others. We have explained and we share with him regularly that our goal is to help him learn to regulate himself rather than using a restraint to physically manage him. Our role is to support him through his feelings and to provide strategies for him to regulate himself in order to stay safe and not get to the point of physical management. The youth continues to push the boundaries of safety to see how far he can go before we will put our hands on him. However, he has been with us since the beginning of this school year, and we have not needed to physically manage him at all. I am so saddened to know that physical restraint was deemed to be the only option for this student previously, when it has proven to not be necessary here. Dr. Lori Desautels describes neuroplasticity as how all of our relationships, environments, and experiences begin to shape how we perceive, sense, feel, think, and behave in our worlds. The youth that I refer to above will need many, many opportunities with others, particularly with adults in which he has a positive interaction and exchange, even while dysregulated, in order to change and shape how he perceives, feels, and thinks about the world around him. It is not about the behavior that we see, it is about where that behavior comes from, because a person's behavior is often an outward symptom of their nervous system. Connected Circles sees challenging behavior as a puzzle to work through. We ask what happened to them to cause them to react in such a way. We work with youth and their teams to heal from their lived experiences, rather than to physically manage them. The use of restraint is coercive and often re-traumatizing, particularly for the population of youth we serve. We believe in connections over compliance. When a youth is feeling safe and secure, learning will occur, and these young people will flourish. This work takes considerable patience, caring, and time, as youth need many consistent positive experiences with adults before they can begin to establish a level of trust. As it has been taken away through the use of coercive tactics, such as restraint. In order for this trust to develop, many supportive experiences are provided, and every success that these youth experience is celebrated. This work also takes an understanding from our communities and policymakers like you, an understanding of the impact of adverse childhood experiences on the developing body. It appears as though the youth who have had the most adverse experiences find themselves in places where the programs are perpetuating these adverse experiences through the use of restraint and seclusion. Alternative programs like Connected Circles are absolutely necessary to support the healing of today's youth. Unfortunately, programs like this are at a significant risk through the educational reform initiatives that are being considered as we speak. Given my professional experiences in both public and independent schools, I know that this type of therapeutic programming is incredibly difficult to implement within the public school setting. The environment in which the students show up every day matters. This includes the physical space, colors, spatial layout, visual interests, flexibility of programming, and a solid team of people. We have a high student to staff ratio to allow for flexibility, responsiveness, and the support of each other in order to best serve these youth. This work is not easy by any means, but our people are passionate and today's youth deserve opportunities such as Connected Circles. Our youth of today deserve positive daily experiences to heal and grow from the significant challenges they have faced in their young lives. I can answer questions. If anyone is interested to come and take a tour, to set up a time to come and see what we do, get some, on the ground observations, we would invite. We also would just ask that we plan ahead, because in order for the safety of kids, right, we let them know if we have strangers coming.
Absolutely.
And as a small celebration, we are about to launch into a pretty big transition here, because Connected Circles has been invited to join the creative campus that is being developed at the Goddard campus. And we will be moving to Goddard by July 1st, and we will be becoming a part of the creative campus community there, which we're very
cool.
excited
I'll have
about.
to see the new place compared to the old. I've
Yeah.
been there, visited.
Yes.
Thank you, Kelly. Also, since you took the time to, write out your comments, would you please send them in to Lori Morse? That would be great, so we can post them. It's very helpful to have that background and understanding your status as an independent school and how that relates to school districts referring children for your services. And we may have an opportunity to take you up on that field trip. One, because you're relatively close by, which would be great. And we could have an opportunity to look at, as Representative Donahue just said, your current versus your proposed news. Sorry, that was
The wind catches
the wind
sometimes.
catches the door. So that would be great. Are there any questions for this witness?
I do have.
Yes, go ahead,
Yes.
Representative Easton.
Thank you. It's fascinating. You spoke about the situation with regard to the education funding that we're looking at right now. Can you speak a bit, maybe you did and I just didn't catch it. Can you speak a bit about whether or not there's public funding aimed at your school?
So the public schools tuition kids to us.
I see, okay.
Yeah.
And are all 12, no, they can't all be public school kids?
Yes,
They're
they
all-
are.
Yeah,
They are all the way to age 21, you said?
So yes, students who are eligible for special education, if need be, can stay in school until their 22nd birthday.
I see, okay, thank you.
if they haven't completed all of the goals on their IEP.
Yeah.
Correct. And typically,
Yeah, go
by the
ahead.
time they're that age, we're working on transitional skills, right? Employment, independent living, that kind of stuff with the older kids.
Representative McGuire.
Yeah, just a quick question. What's the average age of the children you have now? What's the average age?
I would say 14, 15. This year, we actually have 5 graduates. And so,
Wow.
and currently our youngest is 13 and our oldest is 20. And just, anecdotal data, so to speak, the primary referrals that we receive are mostly male. And we have in recent, an uptick in the number of transgender youth that are being referred to us.
Interesting.
Mhm.
Thank you. And thank you for what you're doing to support children and youth who might be struggling for whatever reason in their local schools. So thank you for continuing to provide that education opportunity for them.
It's a passion,
Yeah.
for sure.
Any other questions for Kelly? Oh, go ahead, Representative Cole.
Sure, I just want to chime in with an additional thanks. I mean, I cannot, just from hearing you speak, I cannot imagine how transformational your method is probably on your life. And having that real support and talking about the roots of where some of these behaviors are coming from, and you can't address them permanently without doing that. So I'm just so amazed, and it's such an incredible model. And if there are any like testimonials, I might be interested in finding those. I was digging around your website a little bit, but
If you have
From-
youth
from
or
students?
families who, from students or families or both.
We have a
Okay.
former student coming back to speak at our graduation.
oh, nice.
Oh, that's awesome.
Super cool.
That's great. Thank you very much for being with us, Kelly. We really appreciate it. And I'm serious about, we might be in touch to make a visit in the next couple of weeks, if that's possible.
That sounds great. You know how to reach
Okay.
me.
All righty. Take care.
All right, thanks. You too.
All righty.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Okay, folks, we have